hi everyone, I'm Claire from Active Transportation Alliance. I'm the Event and Marketing Director. And we're really excited to have with us today Freeman Kevenides, who is a Chicagoland attorney. He's got 23 years of experience in the field and really just an amazing supporter of Active Transportation Alliance for many, many years. So truly making a difference for us, allowing us to continue our work, and has been the title sponsor of Chicago Bike Week for, I think this is our third or fourth year together. So we're really excited to have him join us today. He's going to take us a little bit through Bike Law 101 in the state of Illinois. So at the end, we will have some time for questions or comments. So we'll give Brendan the floor here. Take us through what you got.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Claire. One thing I'll ask is that if you transfer hosting duties so I can do share screen. And I think that should work now. All right. So thanks everyone for being here. You know, when Claire asked me to do this, she said, all right, we're going to do a virtual bike week. We'd love for you to say a few words, to comment, to talk about bike law and answer some questions. Keep your presentation to about 3 to 5 minutes. And I'm like, 3 to 5 minutes? I'm a lawyer. I can barely say my name in 3 or 5 minutes. So, but it was an interesting, I like it because it's an interesting approach. It forced me to distill bike law into a very short period of time. So, with that in mind, I tried to come up with what I thought are just, what are the two headlines in terms of bike law? We know that with things being crazy like they are, we have a lot of new people biking around the city. Many of you may have heard that it's even difficult to buy at least a new bike these days. Bike shops are running out of them. So it seems that we have a lot of new people on the road, which is terrific. So let's distill it. Two most important ways to protect yourself. The first way, be seen. All right, that's the first way, and we're going to talk about how that applies both before a bike crash and after a bike crash. The other way, insurance. Be seen, insurance. If you remember nothing else from this discussion, remember those two things, and if you're covered in that regard, both of those two regards, you've probably done everything you really can to protect yourself when you're out biking, all right? So when we talk about being seen, we have to talk about it, first of all, before any crash happens, right? What does be seen mean to, first of all, prevent a crash? So you never get hurt, you never need a lawyer like me, which is the ideal, right? Two things in terms of being seen before a crash: your roadway positioning and lights, reflectors, and clothing, okay? Let's talk about each of these. Roadway positioning. Remember that if somebody on the road, a driver, can see you, they're probably not going to hit you, right? So that's, as you're out there riding, that's the thing you should be thinking about the most in terms of how can I be safe? Just make sure that you are seen, because other than the crazy person out there, and there's not too many, thankfully, if somebody can see you, they're going to avoid you. Roadway positioning is a core part of that. We want to make sure for all of you newbies out there that you're riding in the street, not the sidewalk, please, for a couple of reasons. First of all, though sidewalk riding is generally allowed under the Illinois Vehicle Code, many municipalities around the state, Chicago included, have local ordinances that prohibit, that don't allow sidewalk riding. In Chicago, if you're under the age of 12, you are not supposed to be riding your bicycle on the sidewalk. Why? Well, the idea is an adult riding their bike on the sidewalk may present a danger to other people using the sidewalk for actual walking. So that's not safe. The other reason you want to use the street and not the sidewalk if you're an adult is you're really much easier to be seen by drivers, in particular at intersections. If you're coming to an intersection where there's cross traffic and you're in the street, you're much more likely to be in the line of vision of the car looking to pull out. If you're on the sidewalk, there's a good chance you may even be behind that driver. As they look to their side, you may be slightly behind them, so you're going to be harder to see. So you want to ride in the street. If there's a bike lane, great, use the bike lane. But even if there isn't, be in the street, not the sidewalk. It sounds a little counterintuitive, but it actually is much, much safer. The other thing you want to remember is ride with the flow of traffic. You are supposed to ride in the same direction as other motor vehicle traffic on the roadway, not against traffic. I've heard plenty of people say that, well, look, I want to be able to ride so I can see traffic coming at me. That's not unreasonable, but one, that's not the law. The law does require you to ride with traffic. And two, you're more predictable to other drivers when you're riding with the flow of traffic. People in cars are simply not expecting another vehicle to be coming at them, coming towards them on the same side of the roadway. So being predictable is vitally important. You want to ride with the flow of traffic. Where in the lane, when you're riding with the flow of traffic, are you supposed to ride? The next 2 points, bullet points I have on here address that. Generally speaking, in a roadway that's wide enough, you want to ride as far to the right as is safe and practicable. Not, however, as far to the right as possible. Why? If you're riding as far to the right as possible, in other words, hugging the curb, you're much more likely to come into contact with, broken glass, garbage, potholes, things like that. So it's more dangerous. If there are cars parked along the curb and you're riding as far to the right as possible, in other words, sort of hugging those cars, you're riding in what we call the door zone. You're opening yourself up to the driver exiting their vehicle, having parallel parked, and opening their door into your path, which is a very, the most common way we see bicyclists injured in the city. So in that situation, you want to give yourself 3 to 4 feet to the left of parked cars. So again, ride to the right of the roadway, but not as far as you can go, only as far to the right as is safe for you, okay? What happens when you're riding on a narrow roadway and riding to the right, you're not giving space for cars to pass, or they're passing you very closely. When you're riding in a roadway with a very narrow lane that does not allow a motor vehicle and a bike to be side by side within the lane safely, then the bicyclist should, and this is going to sound counterintuitive, move to their left. You should move farther out into the lane. That way, again, you are much more visible to drivers coming up behind you, as well as to drivers that may be coming out of a cross street. I know that can sound scary. You may have people that honk at you from time to time, but honking, if drivers are honking at you, as distressing as that is, at least they can see you. And that is, remember, be seen. That is the #1 most important thing to be safe out on the road, okay? With regard to roadway positioning, I'm kind of throwing this in there as well. When you're doing all these things, when you're moving to take the lane, when you're moving to the left because you have to turn left, always make sure that you signal your intent. That is the law. For you newbies out there, you must signal your intent every single time. All right, so be seen, be predictable. And when you're signaling your intent, throwing out your left hand to say you're going to turn left, turning it upwards to turn right, or putting it down to say you're going to stop, you're being visible, you're being seen by the driver, you're telling them what you're going to do, and that'll help you keep safe, all right? The other way I mentioned to be seen, I'm going to admit one person here, popped up on my screen. The other way to be seen is to use lights and reflectors, and that's the law. and also contrasting clothing. Not the law, but is a good practice, a good thing to be in the practice of doing. The law in Illinois is that if you are riding at night, you must have a white facing headlight, okay? And it must be seen, I forget what it is, from at least 500 feet away, I think it is. So a good white headlight on the front. On the rear of your bike, you must, under the law, have either a red light that can also be seen from 500 feet away, or a red rear reflector. Frankly, I would strongly recommend both, and I would certainly have the light. You want to be seen, and you want to make it easy for drivers to see you. There are some states that require lights in inclement weather, when it's raining or whatever. Illinois doesn't, but it's a good practice to be in. If it's raining, if it's snowing, turn your lights on so drivers can see you. If they can see you, they're probably not going to hit you. Clothing. You want to try to wear contrasting clothing. I mean, if you're riding at night, try not to wear all black. If you're riding during the daytime, bright colors are great. Nighttime, white is ideal. Anything you can do to make yourself brighter, make yourself stand out in the road. And remember, when you're riding in the city, okay, this is important to keep in mind, there's a lot of competition for a driver's vision. They've got stoplights, they've got businesses, they've got signs, they've got pedestrians, other drivers, people on bikes. There is a lot competing for a driver's attention. You should be first and foremost in their line of sight by doing all these things, by being positioned in the road correctly, wearing bright clothing, having lights and reflectors at night. All right? Being seen, oops, try to advance this. Being seen after a crash means something a little bit different. So say you've done all of these things, you've positioned yourself correctly in the roadway, you have reflectors, lights, you're wearing bright clothing, and you still get hit. You need to be seen, as it were, even after a crash. The way you do that, you need to be seen by the police. After a crash, you need to call the police. Why? Because you need to get a police report. Police reports are a subject of controversy in my world, in bike world, because the police, when they come to a scene, unfortunately, they're often unhelpful or unpleasant. Not always, but too many times, all right? A lot of times they don't want to create a report for you. I was doored a few years ago. The police came to the scene. They said, you don't need a report. And I said, well, wait a minute. I kind of know what I'm doing. I'm a lawyer here. And they're like, all right, you got us. We'll do a report. So you need to politely insist that the police create a report, because if you're going to pursue a claim against the driver down the road, you need that report to provide some credibility that, yeah, this event happened on this date at around this time at this location. And having that police report helps that. Police reports are not admissible at trial. They're not competent evidence. But in terms of getting your case resolved with an insurance company, not having a police report creates a big problem. So it really is important that a report is created. If the police do not come to the scene, that's okay. You can always go to the police station the next day or even the day after that and go have a report made. I've instructed many people to do that who have called me saying I was in a crash. So very important. Even more important than be seen by the police, be seen by a physician after a crash. If there is any doubt in your mind at all whether you're hurt or not, and remember, after a crash, your adrenaline's going to be flowing. Maybe you're in pain, maybe you're confused, maybe you're angry, maybe you're upset. You're not at your best in terms, let's be frank, you're not at your best in terms of decision making after you've been in a crash. So if there's any doubt at all, go to the hospital. Ideally, you go to the emergency room, go see your doctor same day. Vitally important, because one, your own health. I remember a case years ago where a guy was hit by a van in the Logan Square area. He felt tired afterwards, didn't think he was badly hurt, went home, just laid down for a while rather than going to the hospital. He never woke up. And sadly, he had a small and slow bleed in his brain, and the bleeding continued while he was asleep, and eventually it led to his death. So you may not realize the extent of your injuries, so don't take any chances. The other thing is that if a claim is brought, and if there's been a delay in you getting medical care, it calls into question the seriousness of your injury, and potentially, depending on how long you've waited, it could call into question the cause of your injury. Say you sprain your ankle in a crash, but you wait 5 days to go to the doctor to be seen. If you have an attorney that's representing you in a claim, you know, the other side will say, well, what happened during that 5 days? How did we know she didn't, you know, trip going down the stairs? And that's how the ankle was sprained rather than in this bike crash. So again, that's another reason you want to be seen as quickly as possible by a physician. It lends credibility to your claim, and it provides you with quick care in case your injury is more severe than you realized. The other way to be seen by a lawyer if you need it. And you know, any lawyer, any personal injury lawyer that you talk to, whether it's me or somebody else, should absolutely be happy to just chat with you at no cost at all after you've been in a crash. Say, you know, I don't know what happened. Maybe my bike was just damaged. My injuries are minor. You know, I just went to an urgent care clinic. They gave me an aspirin. I went home. I don't think I need it. Nevertheless, I would definitely urge you to contact an attorney you trust and who knows this stuff. And a good lawyer will tell you, you know what? Your injuries are minor, or there's only property damage. I'll walk you through how you can handle this on your own. And then you can go ahead and do that. But if your injuries are more substantial, you're going to have bills with or without health insurance, you really probably do want an attorney to help you, because if you decide well down the road that you're in over your head, the insurance company's not being fair with you, you can't reach the driver or the defendant on the phone, you can still contact a lawyer, but it's much better if the lawyer's in it from the beginning. They've had an opportunity to collect important evidence, preserve things that need to be preserved. So even if you don't hire an attorney, I would definitely recommend at least talking to an attorney after a crash, just to make sure you're doing everything correctly. All right, so be seen, both before and after a crash. The next item that I want you to remember is about insurance. That's the other important thing. You probably, if you're riding your bike a lot around the city, if you're using it to get around, to commute to work, what have you, you probably want to have some sort of insurance, whether that's health insurance, and that's ideal, right? Because medical bills, even if you just go to the emergency room, maybe you get an x-ray for a sore wrist, you know, and you took the ambulance to get there, that ambulance bill is going to be $1,000. The hospital bill may be, you know, $3,000, $3,500. You're going to want to make sure you have health insurance to make sure at least part of that is paid. Now, I recommend that not everyone that would like to have insurance can easily get or afford health insurance. The other option is having your own automobile insurance coverage. Okay, why? What does your own auto insurance coverage have to do with protecting you while you're riding your own bicycle? Well, most policies will at least have given you the option to have underinsured and uninsured motorist coverage. What that coverage does is, if you are injured in any motor vehicle accident, even if you're on foot, even if you're on a bike, and that driver either doesn't have insurance coverage or has insufficient coverage, you're provided with coverage through your own insurance. Yes, drivers in Illinois are required to carry motor vehicle coverage of up to $25,000. Many, however, do not. I think the number I've seen a few years ago is that 1 in 7 drivers nationally does not have auto coverage, even though they're required in, I think, at least 49 states to have it. In the city of Chicago, just anecdotally, it seems more like 1 in 3 people don't have it. So it is important that you have your own coverage. Underinsured coverage, as I mentioned, medical bills are extremely expensive. If you've got a significant injury, say you need surgery, you've got medical bills over $100,000, and the driver only has the minimal $25,000 coverage, then potentially, assuming your coverage is higher than the driver's, your underinsured coverage could come in and fill a gap. That can get complicated, but again, if you find yourself in this situation, don't hesitate to call me or another attorney that you trust. What if you don't have a car? And many of my clients are car-free people. They just have bikes and that's how they get around. You can purchase auto insurance even if you don't have a car. I haven't looked lately around at which auto carriers do that, but you can buy automobile coverage. It's called non-owner's auto coverage. You can buy it. It's less expensive than if you do have a car and buying coverage, but it will provide you with, or it should provide you with, that helpful uninsured and underinsured coverage in the event you are hit by someone that doesn't have it or has insufficient coverage. All right. So, and I think I told you I couldn't say my name in 3 to 5 minutes. I've gone way over the 5 minutes, but I just wanted to share with you, here's some additional resources. My understanding is that this is going to be posted online. The law in Illinois and Chicago, with regard to bikes on the road, comes from 2 sources: the Illinois Vehicle Code and the municipal code of whatever jurisdiction you're in. The Municipal Code of Chicago, Title IX of the Municipal Code of Chicago, has the rules of the road, including rules that must be followed by bicyclists. I'm a member of a bike group called Bike Law. We're a group of lawyers around the country that focus our practices on representing bicyclists. There's a link here to our page where I've outlined all of the laws in Illinois pertinent to bicyclists and their use of our roadways, so you can check that out. The other thing I have on here is my blog, mybikeadvocate.com, which I don't write on as much as I used to. Last year, but there is a lot. I wrote a lot of articles, and virtually every topic I can think of is on there for you to search. So there is a lot of information still on there. Active Trans, of course, has their own site where they outline the rules and regulations for bicyclists. That link's there. And of course, you're always welcome to check out my firm's website, call me or email me directly. So that's it in a nutshell. Now for the fun part, we get to take questions.
Hey, Brendan, I've got a question for you.
Go ahead, Tom.
So much of what is important is your physical well-being and personal protection and things like that. What do you recommend to people about their actual bicycle? There are bicycle values all over the board. Some people have special riders on property insurance or their home insurance, but what do you recommend to people, especially a lot of them that are getting a new bike for the first time, in terms of covering the actual value of the bicycle?
You can have your bicycle will be covered by your homeowner's policy. I recommend that if you have a bike that has significant financial value to you, make sure if you have either homeowners or renters insurance coverage that bike is named therein. On the other hand, and this bears, I think, mentioning, you probably want to avoid using your homeowners or renters coverage to compensate you if your bike is, for example, stolen. Why? Well, you only get to use your homeowners and renters coverage a couple of times over the course of your life. And I've had this discussion with insurance brokers, insurance people. So you kind of want to save those times for when, you know, God forbid your house or your apartment burns down. So yes, you can have it covered under homeowners. On the other hand, I'd be careful about how often you use it. That's what I would say. In terms of your auto coverage, if your bike is damaged, your own auto coverage is not going to compensate you for the loss of the bike. The driver's auto coverage, if they have some, will compensate for both bodily injury and for property damage. So if your bike is damaged in a crash, take lots of pictures, take it to a shop, have a crash assessment done, get that to an attorney with the pictures and the crash assessment, and we or whoever else is representing you will get you compensated for damage to your bike. Does that answer your question, Tom? Your mic's off.
Yeah, yes, it does. Thank you. A lot of people ask that question, and you know what I do personally, I don't know if that's absolutely correct, and certainly not for everybody, but have known a lot of people getting the first decent road bike in the last couple of years that often have that question.
Yeah, I mean, have it covered on homeowners, but you have to kind of weigh the pros and cons whenever you use your homeowners, because you don't get too many of those claims over a lifetime before you find it very difficult to make another.
Thanks.
Yep.
I can go next.
Go ahead.
What are some of the most common accidents, cases, issues, and things of that nature that you deal with?
Great question. So in Chicago, in urban areas, by far, we see the most common cases involve doorings, where you're riding along a row of parked cars. Unbeknownst to you, there's someone, usually a driver, in one of those cars, and the door swings out into you or directly into your path. I don't know what the numbers are, but that is by far what we see most of all. The way you prevent that, as I talked about earlier, is be seen. Be out into the roadway more, so you're out of that door zone. At night, have that front headlight, so if the driver hopefully looks in their side view mirror or turns around, you're easy to see. The other common types of cases we see are definitely intersection cases. First, left crosses, where you have, say, a bicyclist and a driver coming into an intersection from opposite directions. Sometimes the driver doesn't see the bicyclist and turns in front of them or turns directly into them. That is very common, second only to doorings. And again, you can try to prevent that by, one, of course, making sure you're entering the intersection after waiting at a stoplight or a stop sign, and bicyclists are required to do those things in Illinois. And again, being seen, being visible. The third type of crash we see most of all is the right hook. Also happens at an intersection, generally occurs where you have a bicyclist and a driver entering an intersection going in the same direction, perhaps next to one another or nearly next to each other. And the driver looking to turn right doesn't see the bicyclist and hits them or turns in front of them. This particular kind of crash has had deadly consequences, even very recently, as recently as last week, where, as I understand it, we saw a crash involving a city vehicle on Belmont or near Belmont, I want to say. Turning right, there was a bicyclist next to that large, it was like one of those dump truck snow plows. Turning right, didn't see that there was a bicyclist right next to it, and a lot of times what we see is the bicycle, I don't know what happened in that case, but a lot of times what you see is the bicyclist get sucked underneath the vehicle and run over. One of the things you can do, when you're stopped at a light, I'm glad you brought this up, Tom. When you're stopped at a light and you've got a vehicle right next to you, maybe they have a turn signal on, maybe they don't. You really want to try to be a little bit in front of that vehicle or maybe a little bit behind so you're not in their blind spot looking to turn, especially if that's a truck, because it's so very dangerous. So make sure you can be seen in that instance as well. Those are definitely the three most common that we see. Any other questions?
Can you talk a little bit about bike lanes? I have so many incidents happen to me in bike lanes.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that comes. I don't know if you had anything in particular about bike lanes.
Well, like people walking in front of you, like coming out from between two parked cars. I mean, whose fault is that accident? I'm the faster vehicle. But
yeah,
on the other hand,
for sure. I mean, look, there is always everybody using the road is responsible to act reasonably, right? So from the bicyclist perspective, even if you're in the road, even if you're in a situation where you have the clear right of way, yeah, you need to be going a reasonable speed. So if you're in the Dearborn bike lane, right, which is, it's gotten better, but in terms of pedestrians stepping out, that's a scary one. That's part of my bike route every day.
Mine too.
Yeah, I mean, and don't go too fast because, yeah, somebody's going to step out in front of you. I have sued pedestrians for doing that. I have sued pedestrians. I had a case, we resolved it, I think, early, maybe it was late last year, where my client was on the Clinton bike lane, which, as you may know, is very conspicuous. You know, even at that time was painted green. It's two-way. There are the bollards there. There's even that area near the train station. There's a big divvy station. So everything about it screams, hey, there's bikes here. Be careful when crossing. My client's, I forget which direction he's going, but there was a tourist who just walked right into the bike lane. He was a big guy. My client hit him and actually broke some of the bones in his face. And we knew who the pedestrian was. He stuck around. We got his contact information. He was from Pittsburgh. He had homeowners coverage. We brought a claim against his homeowners coverage. We had witnesses that described what happened, and we were able to get compensation. So we have sued reckless pedestrians for stepping out in front of bicyclists. You know, that being said, obviously you don't want a case. You just want to get to work without incident. So going slowly, having that light, being conspicuous. So if a pedestrian does happen to look before stepping out into a bike lane, you're making it as easy for them to see you as possible. Bike lanes are scary too at intersections. I don't know if Cheryl, if you've had experience with that.
Oh yeah.
The one downside, I suppose, to some bike lanes, and I'm thinking particularly the bike lanes we have here in Chicago, where the protection is parked cars. So you have the bike lane, and perhaps to your left are the parked cars. When you get to an intersection, you need to recognize that you are hard to see for a vehicle traveling in the same direction as you. So you're at greater risk maybe for that right hook sort of situation. So I suppose one important, just kind of recognize, don't just say, well, I have the right of way, you know, I'm just going to barrel ahead. You have to sort of recognize and anticipate, all right, if there's a driver here, if there's a motorist here, they're going to have a hard time seeing me, and act appropriately. But yeah, bike lanes can be scary too.
Yeah. I have more trouble with pedestrians than cars.
I have to say I have as well, because they're less predictable, right?
Or too predictable. The light turns yellow and they start to cross into the bike lane and you're stuck with 4 lanes of traffic coming towards you and you can't get past them.
One of the things I've done recently is I actually finally put a bell on my commuter. Usually I was more of a I'll shout at you guy. Hey, you know.
I do that.
That gets tiresome and I feel like kind of a jerk screaming. So a bell is good. Some cities like New York City requires them on bikes. Chicago does not. A bell is kind of a not unpleasant way to give a heads up that, hey, I'm here. So that's one thing, but yeah, pedestrians are a problem.
A lot of them just don't care. You can be ringing your bell, you can be screaming, and they just look at you like, what the, you know?
Yeah, that's
not a legal issue at all. I know that.
It's tough. I would say avoid avoid sort of punishing them, punishment passing a pedestrian. I've seen that happen before, and it works out well for neither party. There's always that tendency, I'm gonna pass you real close so you learn your lesson.
Mistake.
You know what? One, they will not have learned their lesson. They will just have grown to hate bicyclists more than they probably already did, right? They're just gonna get angry. And two, if they suddenly turn around and move, you know, they could get in your way and now you're both going down. So bell, look out, and other than that, that's probably all you can do.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And hopefully the city, I mean, and they've painted the Dearborn bike lane green, making those bike lanes as visible to drivers and pedestrians as possible is helpful, and looks like the city's going in that direction. So hopefully that helps.
Thanks.
Yep.
Any other questions out there? All right. Well, Brendan, thank you so much. I learned a ton of new stuff. I'm sure everyone else did too. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having me, Claire, and all you guys.
Great.
I really appreciate it. And good luck with the rest of Bike Week.
Thank you. Thanks to all that joined us. And if, yeah, please feel free if anyone wants to share this out. This will be posted to our website and our social media. So feel free to share with those other folks you know out there that may also find this helpful. So I hope everyone enjoys the rest of your week. Thanks again, Brendan.
Thank you, Claire.
Thanks, Brendan.
Thanks, Brendan.
Tom.
Bye-bye.
All right, Tom. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Cheryl.